Achewillow, Season 5, Chapter 7, A Bleeding Heart. I am dead. We are dead. When I first encountered one of these creatures, one of these hellhounds, the only thing that prevented my demise was the timely intervention of another demon. One loathsome creature tackling the other in order to feed an insatiable hunger. To this day, I wonder if my savior did it out of an uncontrollable need to fill its missing stomach, or did it realize that I was supplying the magical cake that kept it from starving? It probably doesn't matter in the end. All that's important is that my immediate demise at the jaws of the hellhound was prevented by the hunger demon. Who says two wrongs can't make a right? Tonight, however, as Annabelle and I face down the nightmare dog, there is no one to stand up for us. There will be no divine intervention or stroke of luck, and we don't stand a chance outrunning the beast either. I scan the ground, desperate for some kind of weapon, a branch or a rock, anything that might serve to keep the monster at bay. Even light can't be counted on as an ally, having all but gone from the forest long ago, turning everything around us to blurry shadows, a mess of purple-gray shapes. The hellhound marches forward, its head low to the ground, letting out a guttural growl that makes the ground vibrate. Red and fiery, the glow emanating from the monster is the only source of illumination around, turning the forest into a dark portion of hell. The closer it gets, the brighter the glow, and the deeper the growl. Worst of all is the stench. Like rotting meat tossed on the barbecue, the hound stinks of burning roadkill, spoiled and singed. Each breath it exhales is an exhaust of decay mixed with charcoal that makes me want to gag as much as run.
The one time I could use my overprotective mother,
Annabelle whines behind me. There's a snap of a branch from her direction, but I dare not turn to look, terrified that dropping eye contact with the hellhound would cause it to pounce. Exposed muscles, blurred by a thin smoke, stretch taut and ready to leap. My senses are cut by the bleeding edge of the situation, teetering between life and death. One false move, one twitch at the wrong time, and the hellhound could leap on us, tearing our limbs from our bodies, painting the trees with our blood. Instead, it hesitates. Ponderous steps of its clawed paws take it around a circle, moving to our right while keeping a respectable distance. If we back up, it follows. If we stand still, it prowls around. "My kingdom for a box of salt," I whisper, eliciting a nervous chuckle from Annabelle. How long do we dance like this? We go around in circles so many times that I almost feel dizzy. My steps have cleared the brush under my feet, stamping down the soil and kicking away rocks and branches. We don't dare make a move, breaking the delicate equilibrium that keeps us alive, but neither does the hellhound. "Stay here," I order in a hushed voice. I don't wait for Annabelle to acknowledge or argue. Step by careful step, I start to rotate around the hellhound. Where it moves clockwise, I walk the other way, always keeping my distance. If I were to rank this plan of mine, I'd have to label it as one of my most stupid. Everyone knows not to corner a wild animal, for that is when they turn most vicious. How smart is it that I'm trying to pin a demonic animal between myself and my friend? But I have a hunch. Predictably, the hound becomes more and more agitated the further behind it I walk. The growls intensify and its head snaps back and forth between the two of us. Annabelle seems to be drawing most of the demon's attention, and as she comes into view, I can see why. The snapping I heard was of a branch. Either she tore it off a tree or broke it from a larger specimen, but it now serves as a makeshift spear, which she holds clumsily in front of her. It's good to know that, when we die from the monster's attack, we won't go down without a fight. Still, branch or not, I'd rather avoid the whole mess altogether. At long last, after an eternity of measured steps and nervous glances, I get the Hellhound between Annabelle and I. It could run between us one direction or the other, but otherwise we have it surrounded. Though in this scenario, we're the poor bastards.
Annabelle,
I call out, loud but without yelling. Run.
I'm not leaving you behind,
She insists, brandishing her spear.
You're not. Just run.
And she does, as much as the packed trees will let her. I see her disappear behind the silhouette of leaves and the shadows of trunks, leaving me alone with the beast. The hound gives a hint that it intends to chase, but is quick to remember that I'm still here. It tries to swivel, to turn back in my direction and face me as it did Annabelle a second earlier, but I've seen what I needed to see. The hound's jump is clumsy, and it settles back to prowl with a limp. "You poor thing," I whisper, but only receive a terrible bark as a reply. The creature sounds like two stones crashing into each other, a sound like no living throat should make. It's an animal of pure anger and wrath, yet it's even more furious in the face of pity. Much, though not all, of the fear has drained from me. I stand straight and walk to where Annabelle stood a moment ago, and the Hellhound walks out of my way. Its desire to pounce burns bright in its eyes, every muscle twitching with the desire, the need to attack. "I'll be back," I promise, perhaps foolishly. Then I, too, run. "It's wounded," I gasped, nearly out of breath. Catching up to Annabelle was not an easy task. She started with a far longer head start than I would have thought. Then there was the added difficulty of keeping track of her. The panic and fear did wonders to sharpen my senses, allowing me to see better in the pitch darkness of the choking forest, and hear not only better, but with more discernment every noise around me. But adrenaline will only take me so far. Eventually, the weaving between trees and ducking beneath branches got the better of me, and it's only through sheer luck that I wound up at the same spot where Annabelle was also halted to catch her own breath. "That's why it didn't attack us," I explain. "It's got a wounded leg."
What was it?
Annabelle asks, an edge of panic lingering in her voice. I notice in the sagging light that she's still holding her makeshift spear. White-knuckled, her fists are clenched to the broken branch, as if dropping it might cause her sudden death. "I don't know. I call it a hellhound because it looks like a dog, but I think it's an anger demon. But it's not like I've got an encyclopedia to look that stuff up with." Annabelle leans her spine against a tree. Eyes shut tight and lips pulled back to expose her teeth, she hits the back of her head against the trunk in fear-fueled frustration.
God damn it,
she mumbles.
Is this the kind of stuff Mom goes off to fight every year?
I look back and sniff the air, looking for the telltale stench of burning meat between the leaves. That and other things. She never explained any of this to you? She shakes her head, angry and afraid. I'm not sure what to say at this point. How do you tell someone, "I'm sorry your mom never explained about the demon hunting"? They don't make cards for this kind of situation. I put a hand on her branch, gently taking a hold of it and pulling it from her grasp. Where I can't offer words, perhaps actions will do. Once disarmed, I take her hand and pull her from the tree, forcing her to walk with me in a direction that I hope is further away from the Hellhound. Perhaps it's my mind playing tricks on me, but do I pick up the lingering smell of rotting roast? We walk like that for a while. The only thing keeping either of us from sinking deeper into panic, that connection of holding hands. By the time we step out of the tree line, finally free of the wood's hold and onto the vast and empty fields of the Pickering farm, night has completely enveloped Achewillow. Only the faint glow of a waxing moon illuminates the fields, outlining the forest over dim clouds. Looking south, I can see the regular shapes of roofs, like graphite blocks on the horizon as the only hint of civilization. We're out. I let go of Annabelle's hand, falling to my knees in the dirt, my legs unwilling to support me any longer. Thank the mother we're out. Annabelle follows suit, crumbling to the ground beside me. I expect her to laugh her nervous laugh, exhaling her relief with mirth, but she remains silent. Her focus is solely aimed at the farm, still a good walk from where we emerged, but her stare is blank, as if she was seeing something waiting even further in the distance. And then she snaps out of it.
Wait.
She fumbles around, patting her legs and digging her hands in her pockets.
If we're out of the forest, then we have service.
From her pockets, she produces her phone, which instantly illuminates her face. For a second, I feel like a dunce. All this time, fumbling in the dark, we could have simply pulled out our phones to serve as flashlights. Then I realize how fast our batteries would have run out. And thinking back on the Hellhound, I wonder if the light would have only served as a beacon for the monster.
Eric!
I cry. I, too, frisk myself, frantic to get my phone. The damn thing, aged and decrepit, can barely hold a charge anymore and probably won't live much longer this late at night, but it's worth a shot. Assuming Eric is within a service area, which is doubtful if he and Pickering are still in the woods.
Come on,
I plead, holding the cursed device to my ear. Instead of my Eric's reassuring voice, all I hear is the sing-song automated voice telling me the person I'm trying to reach is unavailable. No ringing, no busy signal, straight to voicemail after that.
Damn it. Still in the forest?
The nod I give her is slow and hesitant, as if answering her question made the reality all that more tangible. I look to the edge of the woods, perhaps hoping to see Eric and Pickering, followed by Darling and Dragon, making their way out, but more likely wondering if they, too, have run into the Hellhound. In quiet agreement, Annabelle and I make our way to the farm. Lights, enthralled to electronic timers, turn themselves on around the various structures, illuminating the front door, the garage, and the front of the stables. They serve as a beacon, guiding us to what feels like safety. It's funny how, in juxtaposition to the forest and its mysteries and demons, the touch of civilization is all it takes to instill a sense of security, no matter how misplaced. Or perhaps that's just the city girl in me talking. Regardless, being bathed in a pool of electric light brings welcome calm to my nerves. "What's that for?" I ask Annabelle, watching as she picks up a pair of small screwdrivers from among Pickering's tools near the tractor. She inspects her loot with the eye of an expert, twisting her lips in a semi-satisfied smirk.
There's gotta be at least some salt in that house,
she answers, tapping the tips of the screwdrivers together. "You're going to break into the place of the guy who laid out my brother like that? Are you insane?" But Annabelle isn't up for a debate. There's no quip or joke, only the nervous steps of a woman who's been shaken to the marrow.
Didn't take much time for them to become good buddies after,
she says, making her way to the back door of the Pickering's farmhouse. "I think it's safe to assume he'll take trespassing a lot more seriously if he comes back and we're chilling in his kitchen." Already, she's kneeling at the door, one dirty screwdriver in her hand, the other held between her teeth. The light of her phone shines on the lock as she starts her work. It's an old door with an old lock and doesn't seem all that complicated, but the tools are clumsy and Annabelle's focus lacking. In the end, she manages to pop the window loose and squeeze her arm inside, unlocking the door from within instead of picking the lock.
"Here we go,"
she says, pride smoothing out her fears a little. "He's going to murder us."
"Better him than that demon. Speaking of which..."
The phone, still in Annabelle's hand, flips adroitly between her fingers as she taps the screen with practiced movements. I can't see what she's doing, but there's such an ease to her movement that I can venture a guess. "Who are you calling?"
"My mom."
I knew it. And because I knew it, my hand was ready. With almost no prompting from my conscious mind, my arm lashes out and I snatch the phone from her fingers.
"Hey!"
My thumb smashes the red button on the screen, terminating the call before it connects, or before Mayor Lagacé can answer. "You can't do that." I hold the phone away, keeping Annabelle from taking it back.
Are you crazy? This is what Mom does. She could be here in 20 minutes and have that demon dead within the hour.
She's shaking with frustration, a kettle brought to the boiling point, ready to bubble over the more confused I make her. It's wounded, I explain.
So what? You want this to be an even fight?
No, I don't want there to be a fight at all. Either my words have lost all sense to her, or she's got me figured out, because instead of the continued escalation, Annabelle freezes. Her mouth shuts and her eyes settle, wide open, on mine. In the dim light of the moon and the faint glow of her phone's screen, I can see the disbelief in her features.
You can't be serious,
she finally mutters. Agnes took it upon herself to suppress her nature and become something better.
It's a demon, Miriam. It probably killed Dragon, and it probably killed every other missing pet in Achewillow. It's like a rabid dog, a wild animal, but 1,000,000 times worse.
A wild animal. That's what people said about Agnes, that it was a matter of time before she would revert to her true nature, but instead she saved me. Would you rather someone had put her down? Annabelle's teeth grit. I know our friendship means a lot to her, as it does to me. It's odd that I would be putting it on the line for something as terrible and dangerous as a hellhound, but for some reason, I can't help myself. I hope this isn't what Helen Edna meant when she said I was reaching too far and should be satisfied with more modest victories. After all, solving the case of the missing pets and ridding Achewillow of a dangerous demon isn't too shabby.
My mom can kill it,
she insists. That's not enough. Her lips form a hermetic seal over her teeth, pressing so hard on one another that her cheeks tremble with the effort. Looking around to distract herself, she takes stock of where we stand. It's a large kitchen, outdated in style and decor, but practical to a fault. In any other situation, I might appreciate the large refrigerator and vintage gas stove, but while I take note, I can't be bothered to admire.
What about Eric?
She thinks she's got me, flipping over a trump card, threatening me with a possible outcome so horrible that even I have to concede the demon dog must be put down. But sweet Annabelle, in spite of her uncanny read on people, has misjudged me. At no point in our conversation did I forget about Eric, my own brother. I think of him, the foolhardy man-boy, ever ready to put himself between danger and whoever might need a savior, and I fear for what might happen should he cross paths with the demon. Would he put himself between monster and man, trying to protect Richard Daniel Pickering? Or would he be wise enough to run? Everything that Annabelle has seen of Eric speaks to his careless bravery, but I hope I know a little better. I watched Eric as he spied on the macaron sprite in my room. Awe and wonder painted his features, but also fear and realizations. He went to bed a changed man after that, I think. And I have to believe a far more careful one, at least when faced with the weird and wonderful of a place like Achewillow. I trust Eric to be smart enough to run, I say, with far less confidence than I would want to project. Or, failing that, Pickering to have the good sense to drag him away. Also, they have Darling with them. I hope. She stomps her foot, literally kicking the floor in frustration as she breaks eye contact.
God damn it, Miriam. Why do you have to be like this?
I know you don't agree, I plead. But please, you have to let me at least try.
Of course I don't agree, but...
She sighs.
But I think I get it.
I hold her phone between us, the light on the screen having since gone out. The moon, framed by the kitchen windows, reflects upon its black surface, a perfect mirror. Is that a yes?
Only if you let me help, and...
She takes her phone back.
The moment I feel this is going south, I'm getting Mom involved.
Fair enough.
Now,
she adds, sounding a little more herself.
How about we try to find some salt?
I smile and reach over her shoulder. My fingers find a light switch next to the door we came through, and I flick it up. 5 yellow incandescent bulbs of uneven intensity flash to life, erasing the shadows that painted the kitchen gray and blue. Blinking away the shock and blindness, it takes a moment for me to focus again and finally see the kitchen for what it really is. While I flirted with good humor for a moment, what I see in Richard Daniel Pickering's kitchen is like liquid nitrogen on my heart. What the hell? Granted, I've been surprised by far more disturbing sights during my stay in Achewillow. In fact, even before moving here, during my time living in Montreal, I've had scares not too different from this one. This isn't the abject terror of blood and murder and the promise of a violent demise, but rather the overwhelming confusion of an unfamiliar sight. Richard Pickering has so far filled a strict mold in my mind. Like dough shaped with a cookie cutter, he's always taken a predictable form. He's the taciturn, self-sufficient, and no-nonsense farmer. He lives alone with his 2 dogs and takes care of his business, hiring who he needs to fill the labor he can't carry alone, but otherwise as salt of the earth as they come. In a way, that made him as un-Achewillow as they come, wearing the skin of such a tried-and-true stereotype. Looking around his kitchen, however, shows that while baking, Pickering's dough may have taken on a different shape altogether.
That,
Annabelle wonders aloud,
is a lot.
It is. I hate to fall back on stereotypes, but I was a young woman living in Montreal during her age of spiritual questioning. I like to think I've dabbled and read about a few religions and systems of belief here and there. It's kind of what CJEP is for, isn't it? Discovering oneself. And that does not exclude matters of faith. But what I see covering the walls and nailed above every door and window in the room defies my ability to catalog. Hundreds of religious symbols and images, spanning dozens of faiths and beliefs, crowd over surfaces. Magnets with photos of the Pope, Virgin Mary, and Dalai Lama fight for real estate over the refrigerator door. Crucifixes, crosses, mandalas, Triskelions, Stars of David, and multitude others huddle above window frames, standing guard at every access point.
It's a bit much.
I concur. I didn't really figure Pickering as the religious type.
Religious? It's like he's running the ultra-decathlon of worship.
Curious but delicate, keenly aware of the desecration, I run a finger over a crucifix hanging near the light switch. It's ornate, but in that manufactured way where you easily see the defects where there should be care and perfections where there should be soul.
Maybe he's a collector?
I suggest, but even I don't believe it. There's something about the quantity and placement that seems exaggerated and intentional. The whole thing is flavored with the subtle taste of paranoia.
Well, if that's the case, this must be the crown jewel.
Annabelle has wandered out of the kitchen and into the living room. There's a musty smell as I follow her in, the kind of background odor that comes from moisture seeping in and evaporating over and over during the course of decades. The decor is exactly what I would have pictured from Pickering. Old sofas in mismatched upholstery with a modest collection of hunting trophies thrown here and there for accent. What should be the centerpiece of the room, an old oak rocking chair, is pushed from the spotlight by the oddest of items.
Pelvis robes?
I wonder aloud. Simple white cloth, naked of unnecessary adornments but for the soft lace at the hem and cuffs, reminiscent of the cloud Pilvists worship, hangs from the back of an armchair. The robes are of proportions with the farmer, but my mind can't possibly picture Pickering wearing them. It's like trying to imagine the shape of a tesseract or what swimming on Ganymede might feel like. The pieces won't come together, each far too alien to the other to fit.
You think they're his?
Annabelle wonders, her finger tracing a stitch on the robes.
Or are they like a trophy?
Antlers and stuffed fish hang from the walls around us, testifying that this is, in a way, a trophy room. But I shudder to think of why Pilvist robes would belong here in that context.
I don't know. Do you think it'd be rude to ask Ian about that?
Annabelle answers with a simple shrug as she walks on, intent on continuing her exploration of the house. I'm wary of her curiosity. Last time we broke into someone's home, she found a way to get hurt, and I don't think this is the time for an encore of that performance. I'm about to follow her, perhaps even bring her back to the kitchen so we can wait without intruding so much, when I'm startled by a loud banging at the back of the house. The kitchen door rattles with the impact, and frantic paws scratch ferociously at the window. Annabelle's curiosity is washed clean, replaced by the pale face and wide eyes of terror. I know what she's thinking. The same image sprung to my mind, too. The Hellhound. It's found us. Like a terrible spirit of vengeance, it tracked us from the forest and will be tearing through the door any moment, dead set on mauling and devouring us. But we're both wrong. A bark, deep and low, enthusiastic with volume, reassures us.
Darling!
I jog back to the kitchen, Annabelle nipping at my heels. The dog isn't the only one who's back from their trek in the woods. A blinding light, like 10 flashlights taped together, burns my retina from the back window. Hinges whine and the door swings open, allowing the massive Great Dane into her home. Darling wastes no time running up to us, sniffing arms and legs with a moist and devoted snout. Clumsily, she bullies me around to get to Annabelle and perform a similar inspection. Snorts and growls testify that she isn't completely satisfied with what she smells, but at long last, Darling does step away, giving us her seal of approval.
How the hell did you two get in here?
Richard Pickering switches off his massive flashlight, allowing me the privilege of sight once more. Even though the light is gone, I can still see it as a dark spot burned into my retina.
Door was unlocked,
Annabelle lies, like someone reading from a well-learned script. Pickering steps farther into his home, looking around before putting his flashlight on the counter and dropping the bag from his shoulder.
Was it now?
He asks, adjusting the crucifix I touched earlier. I want to nod, doing my part to perpetuate Annabelle's deception, but I'm interrupted by the most welcome sight.
There you are,
Eric says, as glad to see me as I am that he's back.
What happened to you two? Well, after you left,
Annabelle continues her fib,
we got a little spooked and made our way back here. Yeah, with night falling, we thought it'd be better to be out of the forest before it got too dark.
Eric smiles and nods, satisfied with our explanation. Pickering, however, isn't so impressed.
We wasted almost an hour looking for the two of you, he says. You should have stayed put.
His annoyance isn't as opaque as he would want it to be, however. I can see through the translucent veneer of anger and spot the subtle hues of disappointment and worry. It's in his mannerisms. His attention isn't on either Annabelle or me, but rather he keeps looking at Darling and inspecting the kitchen with the corner of his eyes.
I'm guessing you didn't find Dragon? Not a trace, Pickering laments. Like he vanished from the face of the earth.
My face twists into a mask of worry and compassion, but there's nothing I can say that will be of any help. I'm torn between telling him about the Hellhound and keeping the secret until I can figure out what to do with the demon. How much does Richard Pickering know about the forces at work in Achewillow? Judging by his collection of religious artifacts, it could be a lot.
Keep that face to yourself, he growls at me. I'm not done looking for my dragon. Not done by a long shot.
Stefan is already sweeping an otherwise empty dining room by the time we get back to the Achewillow Cafe. Though he was taciturn about it, Richard Daniel Pickering did insist on driving each of us home, starting with Annabelle, who seemed none too eager for it, and ending with both Eric and I at the door of the Achewillow. By the time I turned to say goodbye and thank you, the farmer had already driven off. So much for good manners.
Here,
I hand over my keys to Eric.
Why don't you go get some rest? Maybe take a shower.
He sniffs at his own armpits in response, but shrugs, giving no hint of his diagnosis.
What about you? I'm going to help Stefan finish cleaning up and do a little prep for tomorrow.
I put my hand on the door handle, pulling it back by an inch. The large window pane on my left reminds me of my first time seeing a demon intent on murder, and I'm suddenly overwhelmed with gratitude that my brother did not run into the Hellhound after all.
Want me to bring up some leftover pastries and chicken wraps when I'm done?
Yum, he says, taking the keys from my fingers before walking away. I watch him for a second, climbing up the stairs to the apartment. I hope he takes that shower. Every time I take over after Stefan, I remain amazed at how efficient that boy is. He takes care of my cafe the way a mother would want her children cared for. Meticulous and thorough. By the time I take the helm back from him, every detail of the place isn't only where it should be, it's where I like it to be. This leaves me the full liberty to go hide in the kitchen, pulling out all the pots, pans, flours, sugar, spices, and fruits that I could dream of using to bake desserts. Imagine that this is how the Grand Masters felt when they had assistants there to mix their paints and fix their canvases, freeing them to truly plunge into the creative process. The warm and welcoming aroma of strawberry and blueberry strudel fills the kitchen, seeping gently into the dining room of the Achewillow. Oven mitts on, I wait for the timer to ring so I can pull my creations out to cool. This is a blissful place and time, where everything feels just about perfect. No worries or fear can penetrate the cloud of sweet aromas that permeate the Achewillow right now. Even though many things weigh on my conscience, Robert's foot, the Hellhound, Annabelle's relationship with her mother, all of it blurs as the process of baking softens their edges. Until, as so often happens, something must intrude. I must have forgotten to lock the door and missed the chimes ringing. It happens sometimes, though rarely that I'm so absorbed in my work that not only are my problems temporarily obliterated, but so are my senses towards the outside world. It's through that little break, that little mistake, that more problems seem to seep through. I walk out of the kitchen to fetch some pastry trays, but where I expect to find an empty dining room, chairs on the tables and lights turned off for the night, something different waits for me. Someone unexpected. "Ah," the newly familiar voice purrs from the counter. "Ms. Dufour, I was hoping I could bother you for a cup of espresso and perhaps a slice of conversation, if you don't mind." The flawless teeth of Inquisitor Francisco shine from between his lips. He means it to be a smile, but for some reason, I only see threat. Achewillow is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Achewillow to donate. Achewillow has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Achewillow for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Achewillow.